Hello, Cadre 2. This is a video that has to do with our human resources conversation for this semester. And this is a very informal presentation on one of the critical aspects of being a district or school leader in terms of the human resources part of building a leadership capacity, either within the school building or within the school district. As you can see, I'm here in my office. There's been no preparation for this other than a few notes that I've jotted down, and I did not spend any time in a makeup room getting ready for this. This is the way I really look, and you already know that. Okay, the topic, the role of the leader in human resources. And by the way, there's a set of PowerPoint slides, and I haven't yet figured out how to embed those in the video. So if you have a way of splitting your screen and listening to the video or watching the video while you click through the PowerPoint slides, the PowerPoint slides are also on Blackboard under the Classroom Resources tab. The role of the leader kind of comes down to, I think, three statements that need to embrace from a standpoint of how we organize, how we lead, and so forth, especially as it relates to the development of the resources, the human capacity in our school systems, which is so very critical. In fact, it's the stuff that makes it work. That when it goes wrong, it's the stuff that makes it not work so well. And so getting human resources as close to right as possible is very, very important. Well, basically, superintendents are there to lead the system, lead the district. Principals are there to lead the school buildings, and teachers are there to lead the classrooms. And all three need to have a process of getting the right people on the bus, building the pipeline, developing the capacity, and so forth, in order for the system to be as effective as it can possibly be. And we all know how complex schools are. And there's so many things to pay attention to, but probably the three critical things to pay attention to is the leadership of the superintendent, the leadership of the principals, and the leadership of the classroom teachers. The first step in that process we talked about, and this goes along with Jim Collins's Good to Great book, is getting the right people on the bus in the first place. And so when it comes to the superintendent's role, basically that means getting an outstanding principal in every school. And that should be priority number one for the work of the superintendent, to get the best principal they can possibly get in each school. And given that you're likely to inherit a number of those folks when you go into that kind of role, or even if you're a principal and you have assistant principals, you inherit those folks, it's your job to develop them. It's your job to see that there's professional development for them so that they're as effective as possible. When hiring decisions come along, you get your chance to pick the kind of people who best fit the team, the leadership responsibilities, the culture, the context, the capacity that they're going to be assigned to. But getting an outstanding principal in every school has got to be job one of the leader of the system or the superintendent. There's probably five or six elements that are necessary for employing as well as developing effective principals. There have to be some principal leadership standards. In other words, what are the job expectations? What are those minimum 6 to 8 kinds of expectations in terms of leadership that are expected of the principal? And those have to be clearly stated. They have to be written, have to be discussed, in effect signed off on by all the parties, the superintendent, the principal, and so forth. The second is a high-quality development program. Whatever training is necessary, whatever professional development is necessary, whether that's done in-house or out-house, so to speak. I think this is a role for professional organizations, for regional agencies like our service units to play, and so forth, but many districts are large enough to do this in-house. I would suggest that for small schools, this is something that should be done collaboratively across the conference, where they develop these standards so that they're in a collaborative kind of way, and they do the professional development or training kind of activities also in a collaborative kind of manner. The third element is the selective hiring. I think somehow we've got to find a way to not just pick the best person that applies, but to pick the person that's going to be the best fit. And if in the round or if in the process of hiring you really don't find a person who meets those standards, who you don't feel there's a potential for, you go back to the drawing board and you look at all three things: knowledge, skills, and especially at disposition. And we've talked a lot about disposition being probably more important than anything else. The fourth element is on-the-job support. In other words, especially in the introductory or early years of a principal's tenure, having someone who is willing and able to mentor them and to coach them. And I think in the first 3 to 5 years, that coaching kind of process should continue. In small schools, the superintendent may be the one who actually does the coaching, given that their likely experience they've had as a principal can then help transfer that to the new individuals. But this is also something where I think you have to think outside of our organizations, and that our professional organizations like the Nebraska Council of School Administrators, the Nebraska Rural School Communities Association, our regional agencies, all can play a role, in addition to the NAESP, the elementary principals, the middle school principals, the secondary principals, NASCD, the Nebraska Association for Supervision and Curriculum Development. All those can play a role, and I think that leaders in a school district, particularly the superintendent and the principals, should place demands on those organizations that they be part of this leadership development, coaching and mentoring kind of process. And then the fifth element is performance evaluation that's both formative as well as summative, and the emphasis should really be on formative, not the summative part of it. I don't think we can escape the summative kind of evaluation, but I think the more that the evaluations are formative and the individual shows progress, the need for a summative is not quite as intense as it otherwise would be. And I certainly would recommend that summative evaluations occur on a cycle every 3 to 5 years. And the rest of them are formative, unless you get into a situation where basically the individual is not able to do the job, does not respond to the development process. Then it changes that mix of formative, summative to a great degree. One of the things that if I were to do this superintendent thing all over again is we've had PLCs for teachers for a long time. If I were in a large district or if I were in a smaller district, I would look to the region, either the ESU or to a conference, and set up a PLC for principals. I think it's absolutely critical that principals have access to regular and intentional use of structured conversations, not just get together and share the stuff and to bitch and moan or whatever might happen to be, but structured conversations about the issues, about problems, also an opportunity for reflective practice. Certainly as a result of the EDS program, reflective practice should be part of the behavior of all leaders, and I think that again, if I were back in that kind of role, I would insist that reflective practice be part of it. And I would basically say that any conversation that this PLC for principals has is based on some specific and orderly protocol. In other words, develop a way that you proceed through a number of structured questions, no matter what the issue is. Could be like, what happened, why did this happen, and then why did that happen, what could we do differently, what are our options, what would best fit the culture, context, and capacity if we do this again. But those kinds of structured protocols are important. Again, they're not just meet and greet, they're not just social activities. They're intended to be, they are intentional and regular conversations about the work of being a principal. These PLCs, as I indicated, would be a place to test ideas, to reflect on what's happened and why it happened, to collaborate with others about promising or best practices that are occurring in other school districts, and a way to refocus. I think one of the things that we probably do the worst in education is expect that once you get beyond a master's degree and beyond, that you're going to take care of your own re-energizing and refocusing, and that's just simply not the way to develop the leadership. And I think it's the role of the superintendent to help the principals reorganize, re-energize and refocus. One of the things, too, that I think that a PLC for principals can do is establish a safe place for reflection on disposition and mental models. this worked or it didn't work, I felt this way about it, how should I handle that differently? But a place where you can display the dispositions which are so critical to the leadership function, that's a place that it's okay to be passionate, it's okay to be emotional, it's okay to have deep and core values that are being tested and that you want to talk about. And then I think it's a way to take the engine for change based upon people's visions and dreams and move those things forward out of the vision dream process into reality, and as a result give some real energy to the kinds of things that are being proposed. The second thing, good principle in every school, would be to create a pipeline. And again, this doesn't, it's easy to dismiss this as something you can't do in a small school because there's just the superintendent and either one or maybe two principals. How do you create a pipeline? But basically think regionally. What kind of things can you do in a conference or through an ESU or an area agency that begins to not necessarily develop principles for a specific school job, but for a particular role? In other words, how can you begin to do internships and practicums and mentoring processes and so forth, whether it's a small school or a large school? And I'll use the example, Millard has a leadership institute in which principals who are leaders who want to be principals are having the opportunity to learn additional things and to experience the leadership role led by practitioners who are mentoring and ready to coach them. So I think whatever it takes to encourage people to look at those leadership roles, again, regionally or within the school system, is a very important role for the superintendent to play. I would even go so far as to say that every leadership role in a school district, small or large, there should be some kind of a succession plan. In a large district, it would be quite easy to set up a succession plan. In other words, you're grooming someone for the next leadership role that occurs. In a smaller school, I would look at how do we begin to do this on a regional or educational service unit kind of basis. The third thing is creating that leadership development system that we talked about that could be modeled after the Millard Leadership Institute, could be modeled after the Lincoln Public Schools Emerging Leaders Program, could be modeled after NCSA and NERCS's Emerging Leaders Program, but something that says we want to get the best from you by investing our best in you. And I think it's the best way to recognize the professional status of a leader, gives them the opportunity to develop in ways that they cannot do on their own, and do it in a collaborative kind of way. Probably the most important thing, I think, for the superintendent to do is to make sure whatever is done in terms of hiring decisions, apprenticeships, internships, mentoring, coaching, creating stepping stone roles, and making roles attractive, is that those all align to what the district is doing in terms of mission, vision, and values. Can't be separate. That's why we do operating definitions, core values, guiding principles, so that when we think about a PLC for principles, it has an operating definition, set of core values, and guiding principles that are aligned to those of the district in terms of mission, vision, and values. And then I'll just mention very quickly, because I think the steps in this process would actually be the same. The principal's primary role is to make sure there's a quality teacher, an outstanding teacher in every classroom. And that can't be accidental. You can't leave that up to, well, we have a vacancy, let's see what's out there in the field. In most cases, we've been fortunate in Nebraska that a vacancy usually attracts a number of candidates. But we know of districts who've had difficulty hiring math teachers, music teachers, special ed teachers. The more geographically remote some of the districts are, the more difficulty they have in getting an adequate pool, whereas it's not the case in Lincoln, Omaha, Millard, Ralston, Papillion, and those kinds of places. So basically what the principal then does is duplicates what the superintendent does in terms of getting the right people on the bus, creating those elements that says here's our standards for what teachers are to do as leaders in the classroom. We provide high quality training and development, in other words a PLC for them. We're very selective in that hiring process, that we look at knowledge, skills, and disposition. We have coaching and mentoring as on-the-job support, especially during those critical 3 to 5 years at the beginning. And then we do performance evaluation, both formative and summative. PLCs for teachers are absolutely critical, and that's where I think principals can really shine, is providing an opportunity for teachers, just the same as for principals, to do reflective practice, to have structured conversations about issues, about problems, about future decisions, and so forth. A safe place for them to reflect, to try out new ideas, to learn from each other, to get refocused, re-energized, all those kinds of things that we would do for principals, we should be doing for teachers. It would be interesting to find out the degree to which, and I think this is something that would be different and not so easy to do, is how do you create a pipeline for teachers? I think that one of the things that I see on the horizon that this organization called Phi Delta Kappa is doing is creating an organization called Educators Rising, which begins with a high school version of an FFA, FBLA kind of organization for students while they're in high school, that's oriented toward giving them some practical experience in what it would be like to be a teacher. Continuing that Educators Rising opportunity through the college, pre-service, and into their first 3 to 5 years in the profession. And so I think it'd behoove organizations, small schools on a regional or ESU basis, to begin thinking about how you could collectively create this future educators organization, just like we have, like I said, FFA, FBLA, all those kind of things, VICA, and so forth, but tied to educators. It seems to me that we have a role and responsibility in our schools to educate that next group and to bring people into that pipeline. I think larger schools, especially those that are connected to a college or university that does teacher training, should be looking at bringing people in starting in that high school level, not waiting until they're freshmen, sophomores, or even juniors in a pre-service kind of program. And again, all that needs to align to the mission, vision, and values of the organization. That concludes this video. Look forward to seeing you in April for our class session. And don't forget to take a look at the PowerPoint slides that are also posted on Blackboard.